The Sierra Nevada mountains of Northern California have challenged overland travelers in this country for hundreds of years. Today, Union Pacific freight trains still battle this mountain range as they travel through some of the most spectacular scenery in North America. In the first week of 2021, I set out to watch trains cross the Sierras on Union Pacific's Donner Pass. A 5-hour drive brought me to the small town of Truckee, California. The train action started a couple miles east of town as a UP stack train passed a set of Southern Pacific signals with their safe train replacements lying on the ground a few yards away. While Truckee is primarily known for being a year-round resort village to visitors looking to hit the ski slopes of the Sierras or enjoy the serenity of Lake Tahoe, it also serves as the eastern base for Union Pacific's snow fighting operations. On the outskirts of town, the railroad keeps its flangers, spreaders, and specially modified GP40s, which are all tasked with keeping the mainline open no matter what weather Mother Nature throws at the railroad. The next train to roll past my camera was an eastbound manifest with an all-EMD consist. Trailing the SD-70s was a GP40M-2 built for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad 55 years ago. Unfortunately, while I was on this trip, my video camera had some issues with the autofocus unit. I've since gotten it repaired, but want to apologize that some of the shots in this video are a little out of focus. Once the train passed, it was finally time to head into the heart of the Sierras. As I began hiking, I quickly realized that snowshoes were going to be a necessity for this trip, and made a quick run back into town to buy a pair. As I trudged along upgrade, around the corner came a pair of snow fighting jeeps with a flanger in tow. The icicle breaker bar mounted on the roof as well as the rotary windshields make this locomotive really unique and easily identifiable as one of Union Pacific's snow fighting jeeps. A little while later, Amtrak's eastbound California Zephyr came drifting downhill beneath the Southern Pacific Signal Bridge. The SP specifically designed these bridges to be extra wide to give clearance to the snowplows that run on this line. Through the trees you can also catch a glimpse of Donner Lake. Because of the pandemic, in October of 2020, Amtrak cut most of their long-distance trains to tri-weekly departures from each destination. Because of this, only one train would roll by per day for the California Zephyr. Since I enjoy camping, I set up my tent near the Truckee River and spent the night outside. It's definitely a great way to save money on trips, but the single-digit temperatures during the nights did drive me to spring for a hotel on one night during this trip. The first catch of day 2 would be the westbound California Zephyr just after departing Truckee. Because the SP signals on this route are living on borrowed time, I wanted to capture trains passing as many of them as I could. In addition to having a friendly engineer, train number 5 also had a private car on the rear of it this day. Former Gulfmobile in Ohio business car number 50 is now owned by the founder of Patron Tequila. The 1927 Pullman is one of the most opulent rail cars in the world today and is adorned with gaudy furniture and decor on the inside, making the car well over $1 million. Interstate 80 follows a fairly similar route through the mountains as the railroad, making chasing pretty easy. The downside is that many locations have a lot of noise from the highway in the background. Yuba Gap is one of the most photographed locations on Donner Pass, and from a slightly different vantage point than what most people use, I was able to catch the train coming out of both Tunnel 36 and 35. With no grade crossings for dozens of miles in either direction, trains can sneak up on you pretty easily, as this westbound stack train did at Tunnel 36. Until 2009, tunnel clearances on Donner Pass didn't allow for double-stack intermodal trains to use the line, and they were routed over the Feather River Canyon. A several-year, multi-million-dollar project was undertaken to raise the clearances on the tunnels throughout the line, which increased the volume of traffic that goes over this route today. The pusher on this train is SD70AH number 9096, which was the second locomotive on George H.W. Bush's funeral train in 2018. Back in Truckee, I was just barely able to see one of the spreader sets coming off the pass. I'm really not sure why they sent it out during the night since there hadn't been any snowfall for a couple of days. The stack train from Yuba Gap came rolling through town a few minutes later. Unfortunately, the autofocus issues with my camera hit pretty hard, and the shot of the DPU going by is pretty blurry. A set of 7 light engines soon rolled west as I made my way to lunch. This turned out to be a really slow day on the railroad, and the next train didn't come by until after dark. While the train had a clear signal here at Control Point West Truckee, It stopped just past the signals for a couple minutes. The second locomotive in the consist was a General Electric AC6000, and the fourth locomotive was a rare SD59MX, which is an SD60M rebuilt by EMD to Tier 3.5 emission standards. These locomotives almost never leave California, so it was really nice to see one in action. The train consisted of empty Trinity Industries leasing rapid discharge hoppers. This train's loaded counterpart moves coal from the Powder River Basin in Wyoming to the west coast for export to China. After a much appreciated warm night staying at the Cedar House Sport Hotel, dawn found me at Immigrant Gap. The view from atop the cliff over the tracks is spectacular, but the wind was brutal at that elevation. I continued venturing west, stopping in Alta, California to watch a heavy intermodal train battle up grade. Sadly, the autofocus issue returned, but the sound of the diesels hard at work was still fantastic. The charming town of Colfax was a great spot to pick up lunch and see a few trains. First up was an empty grain train returning to the grain elevators of the Midwest. Like many communities found in the state of endless laws, codes, ordinances, and regulations, Colfax is a quiet zone where train horns are prohibited for grade crossings. The next catch would be a double-stack train carrying hundreds of containers to ports on the west coast. Running nearly 3 hours late, the eastbound California Zephyr finally rolled to a stop at the beautiful Southern Pacific Depot. At the rear of this day's train were two private cars, the Evelyn A. Henry and the Warren R. Henry. These two cars were built for the Union Pacific's City Series streamliners in the 1950s. While the pair of cars are available for charter starting at a mere $10,000 per night, on this trip owner Patrick Henry was on board with his wife, traveling home to Houston. He was nice enough to come out onto the back platform and chat with passengers during the station stop.
Hey, y'all have a good one.
As the train leaves town, you can see him flashing the lights on the rear of the car. I was able to catch up to the train as it passed through the tiny town of Gold Run. The P-42 DCs put on quite a show as they accelerated upgrade. Back at Yuba Gap, I just barely caught a freight train fighting the 2.2% grade up the Sierras. After strapping on my snowshoes, I hiked in between Tunnel 35 and 36 to get one last look at the matching private cars. Before trekking out, the grain train we saw in Colfax made another appearance. If you like this train, don't worry, I caught it again rolling through downtown Truckee in the last vestiges of daylight. The following morning found the westbound California Zephyr winding through the sweeping curves and ponderosa pines along the Truckee River. A heavy wet snow was falling as train number 5 rolled through Soda Springs, dwarfed by the enormous evergreens. With the weather getting worse by the minute, the time had come for me to call an end to my trip and drive back home. It was great getting to experience winter on Donner Pass, and I hope you've enjoyed watching the action. If you've liked this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up below, and subscribe to Signal Light Productions as we've got more great content just like this coming down the tracks. Thanks for watching.